So thrilled to have you here talking about D2C. And Brian, I'd love to start with you and just talk a little bit about why direct-to-consumer is even important to NBC. Obviously, it's a target customer segment, but is this the fastest growing part? Is it at scale right now? Why is that important enough that they have a title like somebody who's really leading and focusing on this segment of the market?
Right. Thank you. So it is something that's very important to NBC Universal. I wouldn't say it's at scale yet within our organization. And so I guess about 7 or 8 months ago, we created this program specifically focused on direct-to-consumer advertisers, and we named it Direct to Scale. So, and simply being that our program is really designed to help brands that were typically born in social scale beyond social, right? They hit a ceiling and they need something a little bit bigger. And so what we've done is we've created this program across our portfolio that allows new to television brands or brands that have typically transacted in the direct response space to access the full depth and breadth of our portfolio. So it's very important to us because if you just think about it from the customer standpoint, and we went out and we listened to the voice of the customer and we asked tons of questions about what was important to them. And what we ended up finding is that these brands spend so much time on segmenting their audience, coming up with a really sound strategy for growth. They spend a lot of time, money, effort, consideration. And then when it's time to execute, they go by a DR schedule. And there's nothing wrong with DR. I spent 10 years of my career working fully in DR. But what I do know is that sometimes, a lot of the time, they're calling the DR person and they're saying, send me the inventory that's available. Whether that inventory matches with the segment or the target or not, who knows? And so what ends up happening is the brand will have to retrofit their strategy to fit the inventory that's available. We kind of didn't think that that was the right way to go about it. So we have plenty of these brands that transact with us in a direct response space, but as these brands do begin to scale, right, we talk to these brands about how we can help in that process. And what we do is we start with just a needs assessment. What does the brand need to grow, right? And then we come back with solutions that are bespoke to each advertiser. And so the real foundation of it all is that we want some skin in the game. We're going to assist in measurement as well. So there was a lot of talk here about attribution and a lot of debate about it. We think that often television doesn't get the credit that it deserves, and some of the value, and a great deal of the value, is siphoned away by social platforms. And so we want to re-engage an advertiser with a different conversation.
So Brian, what's interesting to me is, when the IAB first came out with sort of the D2C thing, I think we were all, for a moment in time, I felt like every meeting I went to, everyone's like, every brand needs to become D2C. It's all about first-party data. But what was fascinating, I went out and talked to a lot of CMOs and CEOs of those direct-to-consumer businesses, and I think some of the conversation that we had earlier around the upper and lower funnel metrics, I was impressed with the sophistication of their thinking because they did start out as digital natives and they did really understand how to use that medium effectively, but they also knew that they needed, to your point, to add scale. They could not push past that plateau but for adding television to the mix. What's the state of the state in terms of their thinking between those different kinds of strategies, and how has it evolved the kinds of solutions that you need to bring to them so that they're not just, applying DR and thinking that that's the only way that you can buy television and drive performance?
Yeah, no. Each advertiser is in a different stage of their life cycle. So when we're talking about smaller to mid-stage startups, they're primarily confined to the social space, and it makes a whole lot of sense for them. They want to drive website traffic, they want to drive customer acquisition, but then as they mature up and start to hit that ceiling, what we find is that they need a little bit more. And so what we start thinking about is how do we drive lifetime value? So thinking about these brands and direct-to-consumer brands and looking at the category broadly, what we find is that over 50% of direct-to-consumer brands are subscription-based or continuity branded companies. And so that really impacted how we approach the marketplace. So lifetime value, listen, it's great. It's a great headline to talk about acquisition, but if those customers churn before you can extract enough value out of them to become profitable, that ends up being a losing proposition for them. So what we do is we come back, we have you guys know what NBC Universal is. We have solutions across linear television, advanced television, programmatic. We can do in-show integrations, and it's really what we present to the advertiser is really based on what their KPIs are. It's a true bespoke solution for them based on their KPIs.
Great, and Fred, I'd love to turn to you. We heard from Mike earlier about how WideOrbit, obviously very known to everyone in this room as a core operational platform sitting across the broadcasters with a sizable share of that spot marketplace in terms of the access to inventory. Now you're selling directly across that whole swath of inventory. And I'd love to hear a little bit more as we transition from D2C into that. Why would D2C be excited to be able to do that? What opportunities does it afford them?
Yeah, like Brian said, there's no cookie cutter approach for the advertisers we have, right? So everyone's different, whether we're talking about DR, brands, everyone's looking for a different measurement of success. One thing what we're seeing through our platform is we're giving brands that ability to really have a finger on the pulse so that they're able to, use the power of TV, which essentially is reach, right? So, if you're a brand and you want to be in 25 markets, there's no point being in 210. So it really is you're finding those efficiencies, and we're also giving them, the capabilities to see exactly how that campaign is delivering real time, so they can make those in-flight optimizations. So instead of, we talk about arbitrage, we're allowing you to buy, by day part, by specific market, program, and it really is getting a lot more granular and giving them the capabilities to really see how they want to carve up their campaign based on the results they're seeing.
And so your title is the word programmatic, and Ashley started off the day with a bunch of definitions. What's your definition of programmatic television at WideOrbit? Because, how automated are we really talking about here?
I think the way like you said, everyone's going to have a different definition of what programmatic is, whether you're digital, whether you're TV. I think we all agree it's an automation of process, but at the same time, I think there's always going to be someone on that hamster wheel trying to make sure that things get accepted, things are submitted on time. So I think that there is a degree of automation, but at the same time, there is some manual, that is ability that's used to make sure that things are still, accepted, delivered, reporting's on time, things like that, because, not everything's going to be fluid and perfect. So I think with that being said, we do see that, yes, there's a, automation, the fact that you can go on our platform and cherry pick what markets, day parts, whatever it, hit submit, and you're able to see that next to reporting. But at the same time, there's also that dependency on the stations to make sure that they're seeing those bids that we're submitting and accepting those, and if not, let us know what the issue is.
So you talked about precision in markets and being able to drill down into particular geographies, and I think overall we're talking about the notion of precise audience segments and to really focus on the audiences that matter most to a business. Last question I'd love to ask of both of you, which is just, do you think we can be too precise in our efforts? I mean, I remember the early days at AOL when we launched behavioral targeting and suddenly got down to a target segment that was so small it wasn't even worth pursuing some days, and no one was willing to pay the premium. So I'm curious, are we dangerously close to too precise, or is it absolutely the right thing for us to be thinking about? I don't know, Brian, if you want to start.
Yeah, I think my opinion on this, and I think it's shared and it's sort of within the spirit of the direct-to-scale team, is that there's a place for both, right? Within NBC Universal, we have optimized linear, we have addressable solutions, programmatic solutions. We can be extremely targeted, but what we're realizing, especially with direct-to-consumer brands, it's not just good enough to do one, right? And so it's a balance of the art and science. And so that's going to be the science piece, but it's also incredibly impactful to have your brand on the Today Show, right? And then back that up with a very specific targeted campaign, either programmatically or addressably. So it's a nice balance of both, and I think that the tech that Denise Colella and her team have built allows us to really give advertisers solutions based on their KPIs and how they want to grow their businesses.
Fred, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something you said about we can get too granular with that data. I think we have to find that balance like we talked about, because I think that, the more precise we get, you're shrinking that funnel and you're missing that whole audience that could be appealing to those consumers that you're trying to reach. So I think that you kind of have that balance of, yes, you need to have data to be strategic with those campaigns, but at the same time, you also need to make sure that you're not trying to get so precise that you're missing out on the big picture.
And then one yes/no question, because I know we're out of time. I'm just curious, are we leaving creative behind? Because we are so focused on the media strategy, but are we leaving creative behind right now?
I'd say from our standpoint and the things that I believe in and our company believes in, I'd say no. Creative is incredibly important.
I would agree with that. I think that's
I
kind
think it's keeping pace with the targeting
Yeah,
and the
because I think you
precision.
have to, right? Because, we see it even if you go to DR, you're going to have different vanity numbers to reach different audience based on market. So I think you have to still have that creative that's following suit with, the technology on the back end. So I think absolutely.
I'd also add, I'm sorry, another great thing and important thing about creative is being contextually aligned, right? And so how impactful is it when you're watching, say, This Is Us, and they're in the bedroom, Randall and Beth's bedroom, and then the first spot in the A position is an ad for a Casper mattress, right? We're not talking about integrating that into the show, but creating a contextually relevant moment that's going to resonate with the audience at large. Very impactful.
So your take is creative is as dynamic as the targeting at this moment.
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
great. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the time, Brian and Fred.
Thank you.